good morning. This is Reverend Cheryl Guest from the Center for Spiritual Living in Palm Desert, California. And today's show, I have a very special person with me, and she's an intern practitioner. Her name is Sharon Guthrie. And I'd like to just ask Sharon just to tell us briefly about her spiritual journey and how she reached this point to where she's into becoming a practitioner.
Thank you, Cheryl. And I'd like to just say thank you for inviting me to have this experience with you. I retired in 2015. I was looking for something that would advance my consciousness, my evolution, something to apply my amazing energy towards. And I came upon Center for Spiritual Living. I'd heard about it before. I had been a Buddhist most of my life, but I was looking for a specific set of tools that I could use to help myself and also others, and share that with others. And so Center for Spiritual Living was perfect. I started training, taking the prerequisite courses in October of 2017, and now I'm just about ready to finish my second year. So I'm really excited to be a part of this community.
Wow, that is so amazing that, I remember going on that spiritual journey, and it was really very intense, the first year especially, when you have to just kind of clean everything out. And I guess I'd been carrying a whole bunch of garbage for years. So I had a lot to clean out.
Me too. Yeah.
Okay, so today we're going to use one of those, as Sharon was speaking about. We're going to teach you or try to show you a way to use some tools to validate yourself. A lot of times we are exposed to people that are what I call, or what I've heard called, invalidators. And that is from a book by Jay Carter, and it's called, and I didn't put this on the title because I didn't want y'all to think this is what it was, but it's called Nasty People. And the reason it's called that is it's just trying to show you that there are some people that use their words to cause harm. And we know that our words and our thoughts create our experience. And whatever we bring in, whatever we learn, or whatever behavior that we're taught, then we use that and create our environment. So if your environment is having some problems, or if you've got some issues that are coming up in your life, well, look at what you're thinking about and look about how you're using your words. And are you using your words to harm people? Well, that's what an invalidator is. And there's different types of invalidators. And one of them is, let's see, like, for example, this will give you a clue is what I'm talking about. It's called, what you've heard about, projection. Well, what that is somebody tries to put their feelings on you and make you think that that's what you are feeling. And that's not the truth. The truth is that if you take those words in and then you start incorporating them, then you're allowing somebody to invalidate you. And so you've got to remember what other people's words are. If they're trying to paint you with their brush, then you need to step back and start looking at the big picture. So Sharon, what are your thoughts on that? Do you have any other types of invalidators that you think about that you know how they use their words and things? Or do you just have something to say about projection?
Well, I've experienced projection numerous times throughout my life, and yeah, it's devastating because sometimes it's unconscious. The one doing the projection is unconscious about what they're doing, and then on the other end there are people who know exactly what they're doing. But the result for the recipient is that you start questioning yourself. You start questioning your value, and your self-esteem over time takes a dip. So this session is really about how we can not allow that to happen to us and to stay with who we really are and what we really are, which is our divine self. So yeah, projection is used often by people who are interested in controlling others, basically.
Exactly. That is great. That's a great insight, because whenever you're projecting, it's more like you're sending a projectile. You're trying to harm the person by putting thoughts in their heads or ideas in their heads that are actually not theirs, but they're yours. So another way of doing it is building you up and then cutting you down. There's different ways that there's all different ways that you can invalidate. And some of the things that Jay had spoken of were that you become uncertain, generalizations like, you are just included in whatever's going on, and then judgment or manipulation. Those are all different types of ways that people can control. But we're just going to focus on a few of them that are really kind of the ones that are the kind of harmful to you. So, for example, building you up and cutting you down. So you need to be extremely careful who you depend upon for your self-esteem. So where should self-esteem come from? Is it something that comes from outside of you that you just take in whatever, you're always busy trying to make yourself feel better from outside influences? And so you have to start remembering that your self-esteem comes from within you. Do you have anything to say about that, Sharon, about self-esteem?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely, your self-esteem has to come from you. But again, when you're dealing with invalidators or the mechanism of invalidation, it's tough once you've started to allow the external forces into your psyche. And so you start what the author talks about, introspecting. So you take it in and you think there's something wrong with you. And your comment about the types that build you up to put you down, it leads to lack of trust. Who can you trust? Somebody starts giving you some compliments. That could be a friend, someone who really values you and cares for you. But you start questioning who's giving you what and whether it's something that you can believe in. And once you've shot yourself in the foot over time, it's very, very difficult to restore that. And I think that's one of the things that science of mind does so well, is to retrain, to allow you to release some of these negative images that maybe we've held for a long time. So anyway.
Yeah, but a lot of the things that we do, the things that we create within our life are learned experiences. For example, no child, no baby is born prejudiced. Prejudice is a learned behavior. We usually learn it from the people around us, from society, all different types of ways. But we have to, at some point in our life, step back and say, is this really true? So when you're working with your belief system, or I like to call it your BS, when you're working with your BS, then you need to make sure that what you're feeling and what you're expressing is what is really true for you. It's not just something someone else told you, or the society believes, or that you've been taught maybe by your parents or your grandparents, who knows. But you just need to step back sometime, and that's the way that you can stop an invalidator also. Stepping back and seeing the big picture rather than introverting and questioning yourself about, is this who I am? So another one is that, remember, an invalidator, when you start getting into that cycle or into that kind of a dynamic in a relationship, you start worrying about what he thinks or what she thinks. And then you start questioning yourself. And then you also worry, which I had this happen to me, you start worrying so much about making them angry. And so you end up spending your entire life walking around this person on eggshells, because you know that whatever they're going to come back with you, at you with, is going to be hurtful and harmful. And so you do whatever you can to keep that from happening. And so you become totally dependent on this person for your sense of worth. And that's not how we're built, folks. We are spiritual beings. So whenever we are cloaking or blocking our spiritual nature in order to please someone else or to do something to keep the peace, as I like to say, you're not keeping the peace. You're causing so much harm to yourself within your body by not being who you are and expressing yourself fully. What do you think, Sharon?
Well, what you said that I was tuned in on is the stepping back and looking at the broader picture. So you have to really, to get to the broader picture, you have to, again, work on yourself a bit. But I think one of the things that has helped me is to not take things personally. Mm-hmm. And that's easier said than done. Yes. But to not take things personally and to realize, and that's the stepping back, realizing that that's their stuff. whatever mechanism they're using for control or whatever. And again, they may not even be absolutely conscious of it, but to realize that I know who I am and what I am, and to kind of be the observer as opposed to being defensive. Because a tendency, and I'm speaking about myself, is when I started taking things personally and not looking at the broader picture, I would become defensive. And now what I can see is, oh, there that behavior is, and I can just pull it back and not get caught up in it and watch it and stay as peaceful as I can, not get angry, not get defensive, not get impatient, and just let it be. That's been a lot healthier, but that's come from a lot of self-esteem work. And again, looking at and not releasing, owning my power, my divine power, and not releasing that to someone else.
Exactly. That's so well stated. Thank you. So, but now I'd like to talk about, this is one of the meanest and sneakiest invalidators. And like Sharon said, some people are conscious of doing it, but that's only a very, very small percent of the population. They actually use invalidation to, to advance their own feelings of themselves. And so the sneakiest one, though, is the one the double blind. All right. So what that means is that double bind, excuse me. What that is that no matter what you do, you're wrong if you do, and you're wrong if you don't. So it's just like, it's a continuous cycle of no matter what you choose or what you're doing, you're going to be wrong. And if you change and do what they want you to do or whatever, well, then you're still wrong. You can never be right or anything. And that's what happens to somebody that is invalidated. You have to remember this. After a while, they will stop listening. Now, as babies, we were born to listen and to hear and to observe. That's how we grow. That's how we expand our knowledge. That's how we learn to talk and walk and everything else. But what happens with an invalidator, after you've been cut and hurt so many times by their words, that you just stop listening. And it's a protective mechanism. It's just to keep yourself from being that continuous barrage of being hurt. And so the other thing that will happen is not only will you stop listening, you'll do exactly what Sharon just said. You become defensive, and you will fight to the death to be right. And it's not that it's so important to be right. It's just more important not to be wrong anymore. See what the difference is there? It's not that you want to always be right. It's just you don't want to be wrong. And so then you start doing things that will start showing up in your life, and you have the potential. And that's one of the reasons that Jay Carter wrote this book, of becoming an invalidator as well. In order to build up your own self-esteem, that what you will do is you will start invalidating other people because it makes you feel better about yourself. So that's one thing that you should remember, that the traits of an invalidator, these are the three, what Jay Carter called was the three traits of an invalidator. He called it the trilogy. One is the ego. Their ego needs to be fed constantly because they lack self-esteem. And it might not show up because they might appear to be extremely confident and, like really sure of themselves. But the reality is, if you're trying to harm somebody else, there's something going on in here that needs to be fixed. And so then the other thing is they tend to appear to be very arrogant, but only the arrogance is just to fill in for a lack of confidence in themselves. So they always appear to be right no matter what. Even if you know they're wrong, you'll still believe they're right because that's how an invalidator works if you become the victim of an invalidator. And then the third thing is that they have a sense of entitlement. And usually it's because they don't feel like they've accomplished much in their life. And so they cannot allow you to accomplish more. Because then it just, like I said, it's like with self-esteem. Since they have no self-esteem, then they try to receive it from the outside. But if you're doing better and your self-esteem is getting better, then it's not working for them. So they will do whatever needs to be done. And like Sharon said as well, it can be conscious or unconscious. But it doesn't matter. It's just like we say in Science of Mind, the power of this universe whether you're aware of it or you're not aware of it, you're still using it. You're still doing it. You're still using the creative process. You're still expanding your knowledge and growing constantly, but spirit is always present. And so you're always in that moment of knowing that you are entitled to the good that is God. And so you just have to stop. The biggest thing to remember is this: step back. Invalidators want to take you to the microcosm so they can point out push every button that you've built into your body, every button, everything, every thought. So you just have to, the biggest thing is to step back and see the big picture. What do you think, Sharon?
Well, you said so many important things there. One is the power and control. The invalidator wants power and control. One of their central features is to control. Because they feel out of control a lot of times based on the ego, the arrogance, that entitlement package there. But what happens is they want power over somebody as opposed to expressing their own power with somebody in a collaborative way. So that's a tremendous problem. But what you said about the stepping back is important. And part of stepping back for me is because I do have sometimes a defensive posturing that comes from the years of experiencing invalidation, but I have a much better handle on it now. So what I find in the stepping back is to slow my energy down so that it's not so reactive, because that defensive posturing it's a reactive mechanism. And once it's ingrained like that, once it's been internalized, you just behave that way even when someone isn't an invalidator. So it's really clearly important to become mindful of your habits. And then obviously we have tools to change habits, but it takes work. So let me see, I think there was something else I wanted to say about that. Basically the power dimension and being aware not to give your own power away. Being proud of who you are, knowing who you are, you can, by knowing who you are, you can become who you are, which is our divine self. And the more we understand that, we're less likely to give that away. But the slowing down of that quick energy, that quick response to someone who may not even be coming from an invalidating point of view, but once it's ingrained, it becomes more of a habit. So,
exactly. And that's the really important part of this. It's not that you can fix the invalidator. You can't. That's their own journey. That's their own work. But you can do something about how you react or how you allow people to treat you. And what Sharon said is so important, that when you start feeling defensive, if you're with someone, and even though you don't feel like they're really an invalidator, but when you leave, you feel like, oh, I don't feel so good about being around them. So being aware is so critically important. If there's a feeling that you have around this person, or is every time you hang up the phone, you feel like you're depressed, because they've just come after you. I lived with an invalidator for a number of years. And I remember that when he would be out of town, he would call me on the phone and, did you do this? And I'd say, oh, well, no, I didn't get to that today. And here we go, man. He would go off on a tirade of yelling and screaming and just telling me how worthless I was and useless I was, and I didn't do anything to help, and I didn't do this and I didn't do that and all this stuff. And at first I would just sit there and just be stunned by it. But to tell you the truth, and after a while when he would start, I just lay the phone down and walk away. And when I heard it quit squawking, I'd go pick it back up, because I did not want those words pushed into me or pushed at me. Because I knew I couldn't take it. I had to step back. And so, I did that unconsciously, because I was not in this teaching at the time. So that was just my defense mechanism, was just to shut down. I don't want to hear it. I don't need to hear it. I know who I am. At least I thought I did a little bit, but it still affects you. It really does affect you. And so one of the things is to remember too, that living with an invalidator, or being around your best friend who's an invalidator, your parents, whoever, being under constant stress has been shown medically to cause illness, because when you're under stress, your immune system, it's the fight or flight thing. And so what people typically that are victims is, they don't run away, because if they did, they wouldn't be putting up with an invalidator. They do the fight instead of the flight. And when I say that about the fight, is they think that they can take it and that they're strong enough. But when you're under that kind of stress, your immune system shuts down. And so when you're constantly under that stress, all of a sudden you'll see illnesses and weird things, weird illnesses and weird things happening to your body. And it's just because of the stress. Have you experienced that, Sharon?
Volumes of research on the intimate connection between the mind and the body and the neurological system. So yeah, when you're flooding your body with hormones that are stress induced, over time, there is going to be a drastic negative impact on the immune system. And there's ways to counter that through nutrition and exercise and so on. But still, living in that kind of atmosphere on a regular basis is really, really self-defeating. It's really moving away from self-care. And part of taking care of oneself is to be able to recognize when a situation is unhealthy over time, and then to change it if one can. It's sometimes not as easy as we're stating here, but clearly getting a handle on yourself and understanding this dynamic among others in terms of people who are not, don't have your best interests at heart, and moving away from those types of people and creating your own atmosphere of health is a wonderful thing. And Cheryl, I wanted to say one other thing I'd forgotten that, regarding what you were talking about before, the cyclical nature of what happens to a person who's been the recipient of invalidation over time, that oftentimes, as you mentioned, they become an invalidator. So that's the damaging thing. Violence in a family begets violence a lot of times, unless you have cognitive control. And if it's done with children, it's even more devastating. So anyway, I'm glad that we did this session on this, because I think it's really important.
So when we spoke earlier about the introverting, and what that is when an invalidator, it's a very simple thing to explain. When you are experiencing invalidation, the first thing that most people do is you go inside and think, am I really like that? Is that really who I am? Or, so you are allowing somebody else to define who you are. And so that's called introverting. In other words, you just go within yourself. And the more that you do that, the more you become smaller, because you are actually keeping your spirit at bay, because there is no truth in any words that invalidate you, because you are a spiritual being here to express God fully, completely. And so how could anybody else's words, or how can you allow somebody else's words to affect you? Well, because we're still human, folks. We still, walk through this life, and we still have to experience other beings and other people's, what's going on with them. And so that's when, a lot of times when I'm saying introverting, it's that self-talk. That talk, well, my mom said this, so it must be true. So she knows me, so she told me when I was younger that I was this. And so from that point forward, you start thinking that that's who you are. And it was, there was a great story with Edwina Gaines, wrote a great book. I can't think of the name of it, but in this book, she said that there was a little girl, and one day she was singing, she was so happy, and she had a really sweet little voice. But her mother, who had had a horrible day at work and stressful drive home, and everything was just like, she was just like crazy almost by the time she walked through the door, and her little girl's just singing and singing and singing. She said, stop singing. you don't have a good voice. You don't sound good, or something to that effect. And from that moment forward, the child really believed that she couldn't sing, when in reality, she had a really pretty little voice. But that's those little things that, that behaviors that we start believing when we listen to somebody. And I don't think her mother consciously invalidated her. Her mother was just in her own world and doing her own, was just experiencing what she was going through. So that's when you become aware that everybody at some point, not necessarily consciously, has invalidated someone else without even maybe being aware of it. And so that is why it's so important that you keep and you stay on track and recognize and know who you are. Then it doesn't matter what anyone else does around you. Sometimes when people are trying, they'll say something that's invalidating to me, and now I just look at them and say, to myself, not out loud because I don't want to get in a fist fight, but I sit there and say, thank you for showing me who you are out loud. Because when somebody is putting their feelings on you, that is what they're thinking about themselves. Do you see that too, Sharon?
Not taking things personally, stepping back, slowing your energy down, being aware of who you are. And again, it's easier said than done a lot of times, but over time, if you practice with it, it does become what you said, is you can see it happening and you don't have to get caught up in it. And that's the key, is not getting caught up in it, keeping who you are.
Yep. I just had somebody recently, we were on a show together, and we're talking about self-esteem, and almost got into a real intense dialogue about self-esteem. I said, nobody else can build your self-esteem. You have to do that yourself. Well, but that's not everybody. Some people, they depend on you. And I said, but that's the wrong way to do it. Just because that's how you've always done it doesn't mean you have to keep doing it that way. It's like if you learned that if you put yeast in your bread, that it's going to rise, and you haven't done that before, and you've been making pitas basically. So, but the difference is adding that element in of being aware. The awareness is what makes you able to kind of just step back from it. That's it. Being aware of what's going on and not using that self-talk against yourself, because it's just breaking you down. So there are different ways and possible methods that you can confront an invalidator. And one of the things, one of the best ones to do is they'll say something that's really cutting and biting, and you'll say, would you repeat that, please? And what you will find is if they repeat it, they will damp it down a bit, because they realize that what they said was really pretty harsh. And so if you make them repeat it, then they have to hear what they just said to you. So one way to do it is if somebody's saying that, say, could you repeat that, please? And then another way is to tell the whole truth. Now that sounds weird. So when an invalidator is busy doing whatever is going on with the invalidation, tell him, this really has hurt my feelings, or what you just said is not true. That is not who I am. So you have to be strong enough to get over that fear of making them angry, or because see, that's an invalidator also. As soon as you try and stop them, some of them will just go over the top angry. I mean, that's the thing, is they can out anger me, and I'm just, rather than deal with the anger and the hurt that goes along with it, I used to just fall back, walk on eggshells all the time, make sure you don't upset them or say something that's going to, cause them to go off on you. And then another is, remember, if an invalidator is one of those that likes to, one I've experienced was like to say something in front of a whole group of people that is hurtful. I remember one time my invalidator said, in front of a whole group of people, Cheryl's untrainable. I've been doing it for years. I haven't been able to train her. And one of the ladies in the room, because, I'd heard this so many times, that this woman said, what makes you think she needs to be trained? She's not a dog. And I was like, whoa, somebody stepped up and said something to him. I was like, oh my gosh, but they use the group to get their power. In other words, they'll say something like that and everybody will laugh or anything, or will start laughing. And then if you confront them later and you say, why did you say that? That was hurtful. That was, oh gosh, you can't take a joke. You don't have a sense of humor. You heard that one before? Oh, I was just teasing. I was just kidding. But they weren't. They were just trying to do a little jab at you. And you recognize that. So get them alone. Get them out of the group because they don't have the power of the group behind them. So talk to them by themselves. And that's when you need to be honest to say, you hurt my feelings. Please don't do that in front of other people. And please don't even say that to me any longer. But it takes you the strength that you have within you to step up and stop it. Do you see that too, Sharon? Or what do you think about that?
Well, all of those approaches are possibilities. I think for me, the ones I use, it depends on who I'm dealing with. If it's a person that I can walk away from and they're not going to be in my life, like it's not a boss or it's not someone in the family that I have to continue relating to or an intimate other, then I'm going to use a particular approach, and that is probably to just pull away. But the repeat that please, that's a strong possibility, but also I think sometimes what I do is to just smile, and that just drives somebody nuts. If you just smile as if you're not being affected by that at all. But that takes a higher level of, again, awareness and clarity and so on. Telling the whole truth, absolutely, in a non-reactive way, particularly with someone that you really value and may not understand that person, how they are invalidating. Because again, if they've come from a history of invalidation and then they're throwing it at you, so you can be a teacher for them in a way. And in an intimate relationship, of course, you're teaching each other as you go along the way. In terms of calling someone out, I would never call someone out in a public setting. It would be behind closed doors. If you call out an invalidator in a public setting, particularly if it's a person who has power and control over you, like your job, your livelihood, then I would do it behind closed doors. But there's always that risk in doing that. So basically you have to go back to self-care and keeping yourself healthy. And maybe it's leaving that job. Maybe it's leaving that relationship. And then the last one you said, don't play their game. Well, yeah, if we can get to that point, don't play their game and step away, which is what we've been talking about here, then you're in business. You really are.
That's so true. But that's called, all right, there's another one that I love this one. It's called Mirror the Projection. So one of the stories in Jay Carter's book, Nasty People, he said that a woman was taking his class and she was loving it because she was recognizing that her husband was invalidating her, and she was aware of it. She knew that there was something going on, but she didn't actually have the words to express exactly what was going on. She didn't know how to say that I'm being invalidated. And so she was taking this class, and the stronger she got, the more her husband got upset about her taking this class, until one day he said to her, okay, you either quit that class or I'm going to divorce you. There's your choices. So she had been taking the class, so she got smart. So how do you do that? What do you do? Oh my gosh, if I keep taking Jay's class, Jay Carter's class, then my husband's going to divorce me. And what are people going to think? I'd rather have this class rather than have my marriage. But instead, she just said, I'm not going to play that game. I'm going to continue to take the class. And if you want a divorce, that's on you. You go take care of that. So instead of letting him put her in the position where it's an either or, she just said, no, I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing because I enjoy this class and I'm learning a lot. If you want a divorce, then you take care, it's on you. And so she put the game back on him. Now you choose which one you want. And sometimes that's all it takes, is just to mirror it back on them. But these are just suggestions. Everybody has to find their own way of dealing with an invalidator. Because like Sharon said, sometimes you can put yourself in a position where you could possibly be harmed, or you can get fired, you know, or whatever. But if you are in that position to where you do need to speak up, that is another option, is to walk away. But that's not easy if it's a family member or it's somebody you're married to or whatever. So it is a continuing process. That what she found is every time when he would set up this game scenario, you pick, and she just said, you do it. That all of a sudden he stopped using that as a way of creating invalidation. And sometimes it's just a matter of standing up and being, like you said, like Sharon has said, being that spiritually self-aware person that becomes very, very strong in making sure that they're not invalidated. And so anything else, Sharon, you want to add to that?
Well, I think just to recap, that is what I found in the last period of years, becoming more aware and conscious and into self-care. And again, I think my Science of Mind training has advanced this exponentially, is to do not take things personally. Stepping away, slowing down the energy, and not allowing that person to affect me emotionally, where it only hurts me. It's only self-defeating for me to get all agitated, impatient, and feel denigrated and take away from my self-esteem. Not allowing them to have that power and control over me, because it is about power and control. And not becoming defensive. So all of those tools are useful. And of course, the ones that you would select are situational, based on who it is that you're dealing with. But bottom line for me is to know who I am and what I am. And that is, I am a divine entity, and I try, I'm working on it still. This is not a done deal, but to not let someone take my power away from me.
Right. Exactly. So if you are in the victim role, as you know, if you are living with an invalidator and you have actually taken on the role of victim, you have to stop and think, why is this happening? Why have I allowed this to come to this point? And like Sharon said, when you start introverting, they have won. When you start questioning yourself and who you are, they have won. And they have completed their task of invalidating you. And one of the things that's interesting about an invalidator is they absolutely need you. They absolutely need you, because that's how they build their own self-esteem, is by invalidating you. And so if you decide to leave an invalidator, they will do anything they can to get you back. They will work, they will tell you how sad they are, how miserable they are. They're not going to do that any longer. Everything's going to change. They're going to do this and that. And I experienced this. And, but as soon as you go back, you will find, unless there's some significant changes, like through maybe counseling, or, you know, becoming more aware yourself that you have been playing the victim role to this invalidator, then you just have to remember that you've been doing it for survival. But that means you've only been surviving. You have not been living up to your full potential. So it's very easy to fall into the victim role. I know, I've been a victim. I've been there. I lived it, you know, but it's because a lot of times you just aren't even aware of what brought you to that space. And so that's what changed for me. What really changed for me was once I started going to the center and started doing science, and started studying science of mind, because then you become so much more self-aware of the fact that you are not separate. You are all connected to everyone. And even the person that's invalidating you, you are still connected to this person, and they're still a spiritual being. So another way of dealing with it is to look at them and realize that there is some damage there as well. They must have been invalidated at some point. And what does all of this talk about invalidation, it takes you to the one place of recognizing that what we've been talking about is actually verbal abuse. And when you're being abused verbally, these are some of the things that come up. Now, you can get verbal abuse from your boss. You can get verbal abuse from your parents. You can get it from your mate, whoever. But abuse is insidious. It always tends to be cyclical. So what happens is that the abused become abusers. And a lot of times it's with words. A lot of times it could be physical. But the words, it's like Jay Carter said in his book, somebody can punch you in the eye because they're mad at you, or they're angry and you're not doing what they expect you to do. And so they get angry at you and you're not following their expectations. But what you end up seeing is that you'll heal from that. And maybe y'all can get on and be friends and stuff. But words can stay with you forever. And you can just incorporate them into your being, into your human side, and cause these blocks to your spiritual side. Because your spirit, they don't believe any of this. There's none of it, no truth in any invalidation at all. Because you're a spiritual being, you are absolutely fabulous and wonderful. And so sometimes, like I said, a victim will do it from a sense of survival. But are you really surviving? Or are you just existing? Are you really living or just existing? You have to stop and think about that. What do you think about that, Sharon?
So many interesting points, but the part that you said, the point you made about how the invalidator has some serious problems. They are in total separation from their divine selves, and may not even realize it, of course. But when you take that constellation of the three characteristics, ego, arrogance, and sense of entitlement, which is really grounded in self-esteem issues, and you are able to recognize that if someone comes at you with that negative energy and you can step back, that's the stepping back, being aware, being conscious. These are people basically in some degree of pain and distortion and false beliefs and so on. So to take care of yourself, you must step away and allow that to pass, not through you, but maybe over your head. Just let it go. And then you have to make the next decision. If this is an intimate other or someone you're living with on a regular basis, can you help teach them? Sometimes you don't have to teach them verbally, but by being a calm, peaceful, poised, self-caring individual, in that intimate interaction, they may learn something from that. If the damage is perhaps not so great, that it requires something more than just role modeling. But I think it's very important, because when we look at bullies in the school system or anywhere else, these are children or people, adult bullies, who are troubled. They're troubled people. And so to go after them with the same negative energy just doesn't work in the long haul of life. It really doesn't. And what we do here is we practice kindness and compassion. And if we can stay in our kindness and compassion, hold on to our sense of self, know who we are, not let that go, own it, then we're going to be in pretty good shape. It's going to be it may take it's a journey. It's a journey for me, and I'm sure for many others as well. So
exactly. It's so important to remember that. And so now, as we're getting closer to closing our session today, there's no such thing as an invalidator. What did we say? We've been talking about invalidators the whole time. It is the mechanism of invalidation. And every one of us at some point in our lives have probably invalidated someone, whether consciously or unconsciously. And so nobody is an invalidator. There are 1% that use that tool. But remember, invalidation is a tool to get what you want. So if they're using that mechanism consciously, they're pretty dangerous, because they can take you out. You know what I'm saying? If you're not completely aware and comfortable with who you are and what you're doing with your life and how you're expressing yourself. But what Sharon said was so important, that when you come from that awareness and that consciousness, you don't need to get into the fray any longer. you can just watch and just see it, because you have built and unblocked and have allowed that spiritual nature to come forth, to where you recognize that what somebody else is saying has absolutely nothing to do with you. It takes you back to Don Miguel Ruiz in the Four Agreements. If you take things personally, you're causing yourself harm. If you make assumptions about what's going on around you, you're causing harm not only to you, but to whoever else is involved in whatever the situation, the conversation, the experience is going on. So don't make assumptions. Just ask them directly. If you have, ask me. If you have a question about how I'm behaving or what I'm saying, please stop me and ask me what I mean. Because that's the other thing. When you make an assumption about what somebody's saying, then that might not be what their intent is at all. We just have to remember that what we're hearing is filtered through our own experiences, our own belief system. So we have to step back sometime and not make that assumption and just try just to see this person from a different perspective, from, like Sharon said, which is great, as somebody that's extremely wounded or has some severe self-esteem issues. And so they're trying to build themselves up by sucking the energy out of you. Or putting you in that place to where you feel less than. And we never belong there, ever. We can never really be less than. That's just a negative thought that has gotten in our heads. We are powerful beings, each and every one of us, because we are God expressing in every moment of our lives. So you just have to step back. That's it. But also just remember that the third thing with Don Miguel Ruiz is that speak with integrity, or in other words, speak your word and speak your truth in such a way that you're not using your own words to invalidate someone else, or making a judgment about somebody else through your words. And, we all, if you see beauty, if you define beauty, it's from the Tao Te Ching, it says that when you define beauty, you also define ugly, because it's the other half of the coin. It's one coin with two sides. So if you say this is beautiful, then whatever does not meet that criteria is ugly. So judgment and all those other things that occur, you just have to remember that you're making that judgment, but now step back and see that person as a spiritual being, and not making this judgment about you're this, you're that, you're whatever. But don't allow other people to define who you are either. And so the last thought on that one is just to always do your best. And if you're always, that's from Don Miguel Ruiz, the Four Agreements, that if you're always doing your best, you're always in the perfect spot. You're always doing the right thing. Even though it might not unfold that way, it's coming from the intention that you're setting. So set the intention. I will not be a victim. If it takes walking away from your invalidator, or from a person that's invalidating, or using that mechanism of invalidation on you, sometimes you not only just stepping back, it's stepping back and walking out of the room or walking away. That's another way that you can, deal with an invalidator. But remember, every invalidator, you have to determine, using your personality and your thoughts and your belief system, what is the best method to use to make them stop invalidating you. But that's something that, it's an exploratory thing. You have to just walk through several things until you figure it out. But the 4 things that we said, just repeat it, please, or tell the whole truth, and never, ever try to invalidate them in front of a group of people, even if they've done it to you. And then mirror what they're saying. Don't let them put the game on you. Put it back on them. So, but invalidation is one thing that we have to remember. It is a learned behavior. Just like prejudice is a learned behavior. Racism is a learned behavior. We were not born that way. We were born pure little beautiful spirits. And then life experiences and things we were taught and everything else has brought us to this point. But now that we're adults, it's time to clean out that stuff and start examining that stuff and seeing what needs to be removed in order to make you have this full, happy, joyful, and beautiful life. any, but don't be afraid to look within. Don't be afraid of what's going on inside of you and questioning it. Questioning is the strongest thing that you can do. Sharon, do you have any other thoughts?
Probably many thoughts, but just in closing, I'm glad you brought up the 4 agreements. Simple thoughts, but so true. I try to live by them, but also science of mind training has taken me even further on this journey of what we're talking about here, this dynamic of the mechanism of invalidation, knowing that this is not something you're born with. It's a socialized modeling type of behavior, and that it can be changed, and that self-esteem issues can be changed. And it's easier said than done, of course. And when they're grounded, when you have a self-judge that's negative, and it's grounded when you're a child, you may spend quite a bit of time the rest of your life trying to surrender that and release it. But the tools here of science of mind, as well as other kinds of tools that one can use, whether it be psychological talking therapy or whatever, we want to get down to the root belief. And a lot of times it does have to do with self-love. And if you've been exposed to invalidators, that's where they like to take you. Whether they realize it or not, that's where they like to take it. So it is a life journey, but I've found, and I continue to subscribe to science of mind principles because they actually work.
Yes, they do. Yeah, and the principles that we're talking about are just the principles of the knowing that there's only one power and that you are eternally connected to this power. And there is no place in this universe where God is not present in every moment, in every situation. And no matter how things might appear, just knowing that God is in the equation, that there's some reason that this is occurring in your life, whatever's happening. So just to reiterate, and we've said it so many times, but this is the secret passage. This is the code word that you need to use to get there. Step back. Don't let them take you to the micro. Take it to the macro. Take it to the big picture. If what they're saying is like, oh, you're so stupid because you forgot to bring milk home. I called you at work and I told you to bring home some milk and you didn't bring home any milk. Oh, you're so stupid. You're just inconsiderate and all this other stuff. Well, the real problem here, the real thing is the situation. You forgot to bring home some milk, but that doesn't make you stupid or incompetent or anything else. It's just you didn't bring the milk home. So stop thinking about what's being said and start looking at what's really going on, is what we've been saying all along. And so I think that we're have done just about everything we've wanted to do here today. If Sharon has any last thoughts, I'll ask her in just a second. But right now, I'd just like to ask you to please think about donating to the center so we can continue to do this type of programming. And because we do it for free, but it still costs the center, and we still want to just bring all these great messages out to the public. And so please be aware. And if you get any kind of spiritual food from this today, if you're out in a restaurant, you pay for your food, right? So if this fed you spiritually, please think about donating to the center. And there's, if you just look online right now, the link is up online to show you where to click if you want to use PayPal, or you can contact the center. There's so many different ways that you can do it. And so any last thoughts, Sharon?
I want to express my gratitude to you, Reverend Cheryl, for inviting me on. I've enjoyed the experience. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I know Sharon is a powerful practitioner. I know she's still in training, but a practitioner is still a practitioner even without the training, because she knows where to talk to you and how to help you. And if you need any help with something like this, Sharon is as an intern, but she is in the process of finding people that she can have counseling or do sessions with. So that's part of our training. We had to do, I think when I did it, we had to have 5, or I did like 10 because I was hoping this, I just wanted it to, do as many as possible. But if you need some help, we'd be glad to help you. You can either contact me or you can contact Sharon, and just use the same number that you used to donate to call the center, and they can get you in contact with us. And so I'm going to ask Sharon now, after this beautiful session, and thank you so much for, you've just added so much to it. If she would just close us out with a prayer.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. I'd love to. Let's take a moment and allow our awareness to flow inward and breathe easily and effortlessly, knowing that our breath is that of the universe. I am so very thankful to be here in this sacred space and for this opportunity to share thoughts and experiences in this session with Reverend Cheryl and the viewers. I know that all of the wonder, intelligence, and wisdom of spirit radiates within us and through us today and always. I feel the life, love, and beauty that is ours to experience and to share with others. We are all one, and we carry that knowingness with us into the world for the advancement and the enhancement of our beingness, our community, and our planet. I bless each one here today forward on their journey, knowing that we are divine beings, divinely guided and protected as we continue to grow and evolve. And so it is.
And so it is. Thank you. That was beautiful. Okay, so come and join us again. We have another offering next Tuesday. It's one of the staff ministers. And of course, we have so many things going on at the center. So just check our website, CSL Palm Desert, and you'll see all the different offerings that we have every week. So thank you for joining us today. And Sharon, again, thank you so much. It added so much to this, and I appreciate your insights and everything that you gave us today. So we'll see you next time, guys. Bye-bye.